For all the social work students, I have Corey Manning here, Financial Aid Advisor from the University of Iowa. He's here to talk about financial aid FAFSA forms. Right ahead.
Hello, my name is Corey Manning. I'm one of the financial aid advisors here at the University of Iowa, Office of Student Financial Aid. Today I'm going to talk about how to apply for financial aid throughout the school year, covering fall, spring, and even upcoming summer sessions. I'll go ahead and get started with the slides. Financial aid can be broken down into four categories. There's grants, scholarships, work study, and loans. I'll first cover the two types of gift aid, or in other words, free money. Grants generally are only available to undergraduate students. The main application to apply for grants is the FAFSA, which is the federal application, the pre-application for federal student aid. Grants are usually awarded based on financial need, family financial need, and so on. Scholarships are also gift aid, free money. Some can be merit-based, some could be need-based. So, for example, if the scholarship is merit-based, the application would only be looking at, let's say, test scores, school performance. Some scholarships may be not only merit-based, but also need-based. So scholarships could also include or look at FAFSA data, financial need data. So if a scholarship is need-based, not only would it look at your merits, your test scores, high school grades, but it could also potentially, it would also look at FAFSA data. Through the University of Iowa, for undergraduate students, the scholarship research tool is called the Iowa Scholarship Portal, which I'll talk more about later and give an example. But that scholarship portal, the link is located in your MyUI account under the financial aid. Another resource to look for scholarships can also be privately. So after you check out the Iowa Scholarship Portal for undergraduate students, I would also recommend undergraduates and even graduates maybe check around online. There's a free scholarship search engine called FastWeb. The website is fastweb.com. I always like to remind students, parents, that if you are searching online, these searches are free, including scholarships. So, be aware of any potential scams. If a website presenter is asking for a credit card, some form of payment, I would back out of that website and close it down. Searching for aid is free, applying for financial aid is free. So just be aware of those. Plus, you also want to protect your identity. So if you are looking for scholarships or financial aid online, the federal application will ask for your social security number, but I don't think that a scholarship application should ever ask for your social security. Another type of aid is work study, which is more or less a work program on campus. It is financial need based, so it is tied to the FAFSA form. It is also based on, since it is based on financial need, in some cases a student may not qualify. But I always recommend if the student has any interest in finding a job on campus, you do have an option to work, whether it's work study or not work study. The best resource to find a job on campus is through the university. There is a website called Handshake, and I have the link listed there in yellow. So keep in mind that Handshake not only lists work study jobs, but you can also filter that search for non-work study jobs. If you do decide to work on campus, whether it's work study or non-work study, we do not apply those earnings to your university bill. So as you're working on campus, those funds are paid out to students in the form of a paycheck, and you have the flexibility of spending that money how you need it. You could certainly pay it back to your UBill, but I think generally that money is being used to cover probably living expenses or day-to-day personal expenses. The last type of financial aid is not free money, which is loans. Loans can be broken down into two types. There are need-based loans that are based on family income. Those loans, I'd say the need-based loans tend to not accrue interest while you're in school. Unfortunately, need-based loans are only available to undergraduate students. A few years ago, the government ended the program of subsidized need-based loans for graduate students. Non-need-based loans would include unsubsidized Stafford loans. It would be a Parent Plus loan for an undergraduate student. Also, as a graduate student, you have an option for a Graduate Plus loan. We would always recommend that students borrow the unsubsidized student loans before considering a Parent Plus loan or a Graduate Plus loan. Kind of a loan of last resort. Another option after you have exhausted the federal loan options could be a private student loan. Private loans are loans offered by private third parties. They tend to be larger banks. A few ideas or a few companies you may have heard of may possibly be Chase, Citibank, Wells Fargo. There are many private lenders out there. Private loans are credit-based, so I'd say regardless of, let's say, undergraduate or graduate student status, you would need a cosigner. Say, for example, maybe a parent or relative to cosign for a private loan. But to emphasize, we would always recommend borrowing federal student loans first before you entertain the idea of a private student loan. Another thing to think about when applying for financial aid or setting up loans, searching for grants or scholarships, think about what your cost of attendance is. Cost of attendance usually includes tuition and fees, room and board, whether you live on or off campus, or in some cases, students may even live with a parent or relative. Books and supplies, transportation. We think it's good for students to think about, traveling here on campus. Maybe you're commuting. Maybe you're attending here from out of town. Think about expenses that may be needed for traveling over breaks to get back home. Also think about some personal expenses. A few examples might be laundry, toiletries. There can be other day-to-day expenses.
Corey, I have a question.
Yes.
So for FAFSA, you put on the form, you fill out your estimated expenses for this to give you an idea. So and if you got money, you could put them not towards tuition. Let's say you had a scholarship or something, tuition was already covered, but you need living expenses.
So when we, the FAFSA doesn't create your expenses, but the financial aid office will. So we'll create a budget, a unique budget for undergraduates and graduate students. So when you look at a budget, we always include expenses that you are billed for as well as expenses that you are not billed for, which would be, say, personal expenses, transportation expenses. We also try to estimate off-campus living expenses. We do include expenses for living on campus, but so there is some flexibility or variability in budgets. But yeah, potentially you could borrow or receive financial aid to cover personal expenses and expenses. To go into a little more detail about costs, usually like to explain a little bit about contracted charges and non-contracted charges. So as a student, when you receive a bill, a contracted charge would be anything you're normally billed for through the university, which generally can be tuition and fees and room and board if you live on campus. In some cases, if you live off campus through maybe a university apartment, you could also be billed for room and board or room if you didn't have a bill plan. If you purchase books through the university bookstore and charge them onto your university bill through your UI ID card, that could also be a contracted charge. So keep in mind anything that you purchase on campus, tuition fees, on-campus living, those are considered contracted charges. Potentially, you could also have some other charges on campus. Maybe you bought maybe a Hampshire ticket or maybe an athletic ticket. Those are also charges to you, which potentially could be covered by financial aid. In addition to attending, I think it's good for all students, whether you're living on or off campus, to think about non-contracted charges. So, maybe think about books and supplies that you're purchasing online. Maybe think about your off-campus rent, utilities, groceries. If you're commuting from off-campus, think about your fuel expenses, insurance costs, vehicle payments. Other personal expenses may include laundry, or just day-to-day kind of spending money, pocket money type expenses. I have a couple of slides coming up, just kind of briefly showing the costs of attendance for undergraduates and graduates. This information is also available on our website. These costs are listed for a full-time student for 2019, 2020. We don't have the 2020, 2021 costs available. Usually the Iowa Board of Regents will set those costs, at least for tuition and fees, probably sometime in hopefully May or June. But we do try to provide a projected cost of attendance when we begin awarding financial aid for the next school year, usually mid-February. So in this slide, we've broken down the costs for resident and non-resident. I did use the off-campus expenses. Living on campus tends to be similar, but in some cases it could be a little more, a little less. It maybe depends on what kind of room options you choose. On campus, if you were to live in a single room, obviously the cost would be more than if you shared it with a roommate or two. Books and supplies are estimated. Personal and transportation expenses are also estimated. But keep in mind, if you are living on campus, your main costs would be the tuition and fees, housing and meals, and the books and supplies. For a graduate student, on the next slide, I do list the tuition and fees, and then, again, room and board is off campus. I think in some cases we estimate living expenses a little higher. I should say graduate level students. In some cases, the living arrangements may be a little different. Maybe the apartment is a little more expensive. Books and supplies, similar, but could be a little more expensive. Personal and transportation are usually pretty similar. And again, the main expenses you're billed for would be the tuition and fees. The main expenses and so on would be really on you or based on your own budget if you're living on campus. Next slide covers a little more about how do you apply for federal financial aid. Both for undergraduates and graduates, we would recommend that students fill out the FAFSA form every year. This is the main application website that you would visit, FAFSA.gov. And a little more detail about when to fill out the FAFSA. A few years ago, the FAFSA, students filled out the FAFSA starting in January. Well, that's changed now. Students begin the process on October 1st. So the new application for 2020, 2021 opened up here a few weeks ago, or actually about a month ago. And I also like to point out that if a student is thinking about attending summer 2020, so that'll be a summer coming up here, we use the previous year's FAFSA. So if you're thinking about attending UI summer 2020, we actually use the previous year's FAFSA. So not only right now would you want to go ahead and file the 2020-2021 FAFSA, which is available online, you would also want to go ahead and fill out the 2019-2020 FAFSA. And we would use the 2019-2020 FAFSA for summer 2020. If by a unique circumstance, maybe you have already completed a FAFSA, the 2019-2020 FAFSA at your current institution, and you're maybe transferring to Iowa for summer 2020 or beginning summer 2020, what you could do is make a correction to your previous FAFSA by adding Iowa on as a school, having the data sent to us. Something that's a little unique about applying for summer aid at Iowa is we have a separate unique summer aid application that becomes available in mid-April. And that summer application will be available through your MyUI account. And I'll go into a little more detail about the MyUI information coming up in a couple of slides. I've got a screenshot to help you see where that summer application is. When filling out the FAFSA, we always recommend that keep an eye on your FAFSA. The government will send you some emails that they've received the FAFSA, as well as UI will send you some emails too. If you receive an email from the government or from Iowa, be sure to open that email and read through it. In some cases, there might be some missing information on the FAFSA, or maybe the FAFSA would need you to double check some questions. But it's a good idea to keep an eye on your FAFSA, make sure all the information is correct, and watch for those emails to come from us that we received your FAFSA. On this slide, I'll cover some information about your MyUI account and where to locate some information about the status of your financial aid. The website for MyUI, it's myui.uiowa.edu. And up at the top right, in the top header, there is a link that you can click on. It says Financial Aid Billing. And that'll bring up a menu for us. And I think, in my opinion, the first link is probably one of the most important screens to check out. It is the financial aid to-do list. And on the next screen, I'll go into some more detail about the financial aid to-do. There's some other helpful links in this menu. You can eventually check out your award notification, look at your UI financial aid history. There is also the link for undergraduate students, the Iowa Scholarship Portal. It is the fifth link down. As well as the last link towards the bottom, there's also the summer award application that I talked about earlier. I'd like to mention that when you fill out the FAFSA form, for UI, you're applying for fall and spring aid automatically, but that summer term requires a separate application. Also on this main page, just briefly, there is a menu for the billing office. So at some point, if you wanted to check out your university bill, make an online payment, so there are some helpful options there in terms of the university no longer mails a paper bill, so viewing your bill online here is the best path to find. I mentioned in the financial aid menu on MyUI, one of the most important screens to keep an eye on the status of your financial aid file is that to-do list. And on this screen, the screenshot, we color-coded items in green and red. And for this example, at the top, you can see where we have received students' FAFSA, and it's indicated with a green. Further down, we provide a section on loan forms. So if you're missing something in your file, maybe you hadn't activated a student loan, or maybe maybe you're missing a promissory note, or maybe an entrance counseling session is missing, we'll highlight that missing information in red, and then provide a link where you can complete that. So if you decide that when you're awarded financial aid, if you were not interested in borrowing the loans, it's perfectly fine to leave that in red. It's just a reminder that if you decide that you do need to borrow, gives you some helpful pathway on where to go to activate that and set it up. And then eventually, I'd say once you do complete those steps, give the system about a week to update. And then once you activate loans, they would eventually turn to green and show that they were. The next MyUI slide I have here for undergraduate students is the landing page for the Iowa Scholarship Portal, where where an undergraduate student can log in, potentially search for scholarships, and in some cases the college would have a general application. So, for example, like liberal arts and sciences would have a general application that you would fill out, and then that data goes on to the college for review. For graduate students, the university does not have a scholarship portal at this time. So just to kind of recap, as a graduate student, I really think the best place to look for scholarships would be through your college, through your department of study. And then again, maybe also check around online. Take a look at that FAFSA.com website for undergrads and grads to search for scholarships. And this concludes my presentation on financial aid. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. Or if you wanted to search online, you could also find my number, and I'd be happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you.